Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Stephen with you, Rashbi. I love that name, sorry, but I know it's kind of goofy, but it is what it is. Rabbi Shmuel ben Yehoshua. Shabbat Shalom and Good Yantif, because we are coming up to being in the throes of the first of the pilgrimage festivals of the year, Passover, of course. The other two, of course, are Shavuot and Sukkot. There will be a test, so I hope you're taking notes. So this year, Shabbat comes during Chol HaMoed, Passover. Chol HaMoed, which literally means the secular space of the holiday. Moed is seed, can also mean space. Chol means secular. You have the Shabbat Shacharit, which is our Saturday morning service, and you have Shacharit Lachol, which is the weekday morning service. You also have Pesach Shacharit, which would be our Passover morning service. So Passover is initially a 7-day festival. And the first 2 days are key. They're very important. They're either on par with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the high holidays, or they're just like a half step down. But they're very important. And the difference between the festivals and Shabbat, the one big difference is that on the festivals, you are allowed to prepare food for the festival. That's the big deal. The important parts of Passover, being ultimately a 7-day holiday, festival rather, and in the diaspora outside of Israel, it's an 8-day festival, which we'll get to in a second, right before we get into our Torah discussion. The first 2 days are very important. In Israel, the first day is important because they don't have 2 days of Passover in Israel, just the one. And the last 2 days are important either way. Then you've got the middle, what would it be? 4 days, the middle 4 days, which are called Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days, which are kind of like a minor holiday. You're still able to do work, but not as hard because you're still acknowledging the fact that you've got a festival going on. So we're observing the 8 days. Now, in Israel, in ancient Israel, according to the Torah, and in Israel today, the holiday is deemed to be 7 days. It's a 7-day festival per the Torah. When Jews started leaving the Promised Land and we settled in the diaspora in exile, there was some concern, and this is going back a few thousand years, that it would take time for people to realize or understand or get the message that this was indeed Passover. How did people know when the holidays and the festivals were? Well, the High Court of Israel, the Sanhedrin, 71 elders, would wait for 2 witnesses on separate occasions or separately to come to them and say, I see the horns of the new moon. And then they would say, okay, so now we're going to declare the month. That gave them time to look for the full moon, and that would be theoretically the 15th day of the month. That's when you had your festival. If you were in an outlying area, it took time to get that message out. So they allowed an extra day, kind of putting a fence around the Torah, to be able so people would not miss the festival. So that's the story kind of with Passover. Every day of the week, there is a service to Pesach. Now, of course, every day of the week, every day of our lives, there are 3 services, evening, morning, and afternoon. But the services during Passover are special. The first day and then the last 2, and then, of course, the 4 days intervening, the Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days, not as stringent, not as much of a service, but there are still special selections in the service that donate them as or designate them as Passover, one of them being Hallel. There's a Hallel after the Shachrit Amidah before we go into a Torah service, and there is a Torah service every single day. The Hallel is a half Hallel, a Chetzi Hallel. There's 2 Psalms that are left out because it was basically the same sacrifice every day, as opposed to Sukkot, which is also a 7 or 8-day festival, where there's a service every day, but it's a full Hallel because there was a different offering, a of each of the days, and we'll get to that when we come to Sukkot. Any questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, so even though there are different Torah readings that are scattered throughout the festival, they basically run around three themes. The themes are redemption from Egypt, the redemption of the firstborn, the remembering of the firstborn, and the idea that during Passover, we're remembering the fact that God is with us, that we have days of Shabbat, we have days of respecting others, and remembering the stranger because we were strangers in Egypt. And we talk about the notion of bullying, okay? What happens when people bully other people? Somebody they don't like. They're oppressing the stranger, right? So in Judaism, that's absolutely unheard of, okay? So there are some specific Torah readings that we do. And in fact, during the Shabbat of Passover, and in this year, it's the Shabbat of Chol HaMoed. It comes in an intermediate year, whereas in some years, you can have two Shabbats during Passover. If Passover starts on Shabbat, then the last day is also going to be a Shabbat, right? It's also going to be a Passover, which means that the usual flow of the portions going through the Torah is interrupted. And this is why there are some leap years when you might have portions doubled up that you wouldn't think of because you're missing a couple of portions because of these two Shabbats. Kind of make up for it. So we get, we finish the Torah by Simchat Torah right after the high holidays. So what are those specific themes? So on Shabbat, we're going to talk about the idea of starting the Passover, the leaving Egypt. The fact that the Israel was in Egypt, and God is saying, this is going, I'm going to send the destroyer out. They are going to kill the firstborn in retribution for the fact that the Egyptians killed Israel's firstborn son, to make sure, that the wizards had predicted this. Turns out they were right, weren't they? But nevertheless, had they not killed the firstborn, would there be a need for, a redeemer like Moses to come along? Maybe not. Maybe everybody would have lived together, and it would have been a nice, big, happy, multicultural family. Who knows, right? So Moses is telling them that there's going to be a feast because you're going to be free soon. So you kill a lamb, the Pesach lamb. Today in our Seder, we use the shank bone as a remembering of that. And you're going to finish it up in one night because we're leaving. You're not going to be able to take any food. And of course, they didn't have refrigeration back then. Carrying like a little ice chest with them through the wilderness, right? I don't know if people saw that cartoon I placed on Facebook. It shows what if they had cell phones, in back then. You see people, the sea is split, and they're all like, taking selfies with the, anyway. Okay, so with the, so they're going to eat it. If you have a small family, you invite others to eat with you because there's, you're not going to take anything with you. And with the lamb, with the blood of the lamb that's slaughtered, you're going to put it on the lintels, on the doorposts of the door, so the destroyer knows to pass over the door. Now, again, as we've discussed, does the destroyer knows who's Israel and who isn't? Yes, but it's sometimes you just have to take the action. You just have to do it as an acknowledgement. We also have the Song of the Sea on the seventh day of Passover. Big deal. Seventh and eighth day, we see that. That as as they're leaving Egypt, we had that miracle of the splitting of the Sea of Reeds after Nachshon ben Aminadab, who was the prince of Judah, trusted God enough to walk into the sea. He got up to his neck, and that's when, bam, that's when the waters parted, and that's when they took their selfies, I guess, whatever. So there's another interesting portion that's read on the second day of Passover that's actually read on Sukkot as well, and that is when God lays out, these are going to be your festivals. So here we have actually the beginning of Judaism, don't we? Because, Israel was just a collection of tribes, right? That were descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were Hebrews. And they knew that there was this level of righteousness that they had to portray, but now it's getting formalized. Now they're becoming a people. They were living in slavery, living in a foreign land that worshiped idols. So now we got to get them away from that, and we have to start a whole new culture of righteousness, worshiping a one true God of righteousness, and you have to be righteous. Let me leave you with this. Years ago, when I was going through college and I was taking some education courses, I got involved in, a theory of education called developmentalism, espoused by John Dewey. For any of you teachers out there, and I asked my rabbi, you know, not that I want to stand on one leg, but what would you say is the central theme of Judaism? And he smiled and he said, well, we're all made in God's image, so imitate God. Use God as your role model. So think about that as we go through Passover. Think of the redemption. Think of this as our beginning as a people. Think of God being on our side. Think about not spreading gossipers or oppressing strangers and being righteous and clinging to Torah. Okay, that's the message for Passover. So Shabbat Shalom, good Yontif. Looking forward to seeing you worshiping.